A BBC presenter has complained that when he goes into meetings at the BBC, he is surrounded by white people. This apparently is affecting his mental health. I'm Granny Opterix. BBC presenter Nihal Arthanayake is the chap in question, and he says the overwhelmingly white workplace affects his mental health. I wonder if it's the overly white workplace or the fact that he's surrounded by white BBC wokeists, because being surrounded by those guys is enough to affect anyone's mental health. However, let's see what the Standard's take on this is. It's really affecting me that I walk in and all I see is white people, the Radio 5 presenter told a diversity conference. So he sees white people, does he? Now, maybe let's have a look at this while I'm at it, because it did put me in mind of this. This is at the time, he wasn't the First Minister of Scotland, Humza Yousaf, but he is the First Minister now. And this is a speech he made in the Scottish Parliament to wide applause.
When the most senior positions in Scotland are filled almost exclusively by those who are white. Take my portfolio alone. The Lord President, white. The Lord Justice Clerk, white. Every High Court judge, white. The Lord Advocate, white. The Solicitor General, white. The Chief Constable, white. Every Deputy Chief Constable, white. Every Assistant Chief Constable, white. The Head of the Law Society, white. The Head of the Faculty of Advocates, white. Every Prison Governor, white. And not just Justice. The Chief Medical Officer, white. The Chief Nursing Officer, white. The Chief Veterinary Officer, white. The Chief Social Work Advisor, white. Almost every trade union in this country headed by people who are white. In the Scottish Government, every Director General is white. Every chair of every public body is white. That is not good enough.
And having heard that, this was some time ago, Elon Musk, God bless him, made a statement. He called Humza Yousaf a blatant racist, which is something that no one in the BBC would dare do, but that's exactly what he is. Well, in my humble opinion, Elon Musk has called Humza Yousaf a blatant racist in response to video footage of a speech the First Minister gave decrying the lack of prominent non-white people in Scotland. I have to point out that Scotland is a nation that, for all of its history that we can trace, the people have been white, and it is now 95% of that same ilk. The world's richest man took to his ex-social media platform, formerly known as Twitter, to launch the attack on Mr. Yousaf after viewing a post that contained a clip from the 2020 speech. Oh, I do hope it was mine, because I've mentioned that clip on several occasions. Oh yeah, he was then the Scottish Justice Secretary. This is the Justice Secretary of a country, and he is concerned with the skin colour of the people in that country. I do wish that Mr. Musk would give the same treatment to Nihal Arthanayake. Remember Nihal Arthanayake? Yeah, that Nithanayake. Oh dear, I probably got his name wrong. So let's just have a look at what he says. The fact is, he did this at a journalism diversity conference. So he was talking on this subject in a conference that was set up. I don't know whether it was set up by the BBC, but obviously it would have had the BBC's enthusiastic backing. It was set up specifically to make people, either white people, guilty about being white, or people of various shades of brown to feel victimised. That's what that whole conference would have done. And I'm interrupting myself here to remind you to click like, to subscribe and to share. And if you're on YouTube, remember to click the notification bell. All the links to my other channels are in the description, including links to donation sites. I'm always grateful for donations, of course, but just clicking like is the best thing you can do for this video and my channel generally. And I'm reminding you that the Christmas 2023 competition is now open. The link to the video telling you all about it is also in the description. His colleagues, it says, responded defensively, he claimed, saying that they were not being racist, which he said was missing the point. No. They were saying they were not being racist, which is a typical sort of BBC answer. Of course they're being racist. Most of the people in the BBC are racist. It's a fashionable type of racism, but it's racism nonetheless. But they will deny it hotly. The fact is that he's being racist as well, because they're all doing that. That's the atmosphere, especially an atmosphere that the BBC has cultivated. And as I've said, I have many new subscribers recently. I used to work for the BBC. This is something you might not know. I used to work for them. I thought they were all a bunch of little shits. And I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be a lady, but there isn't any other way of describing most of the people with whom I worked in the BBC. I didn't get along with them and they didn't get along with me, which is why I'm not working for them. But I think that was a lucky escape, actually, because after I left, the BBC started to go downhill very quickly. I would like to think it was because of me, but I think it was more the symptom of me not working for me, being unable to work for them than me being a cause. Speaking at the Journalism Diversity Fund, it's got initials here, the JDF conference in BBC Media City in Salford. Okay, so there we have it. The BBC backed it. They gave the premises. I don't know who the Journalism Diversity Fund is. I should have looked that up before I started this, but, well, I haven't. So maybe you can look it up. But it seems to me like many of these things, it's just a bunch of people who are making a lot of money out of making white people feel guilty. And one of the ways they do it is by getting the BBC to host their conferences. Okay, this presenter, I'm not going to try and remember his name again, said others found they had to try to be a certain type of person to progress with the broadcaster. Oh, yes, you do. You do have to try to be a certain type of broadcaster. You have to be a Guardian reader. That's about it. If you want journalists to progress, they have to be who they are. No, they have to tell the truth, which is something that BBC journalists tend not to do on many occasions. I think most of us have found. I don't think there's a single Muslim involved in the senior editorial processes, he says. They will be when they're up to snuff, I'm afraid. He went on, the hardest thing is to walk into a room, look around, and nobody looks like you. Nobody looks like me. I used to walk into meeting rooms all the time. Nobody looked like me. What is he talking about? I mean, this is hypersensitivity, is it not? The JDF awards bursaries to aspiring journalists from diverse backgrounds, and that probably means brown backgrounds, Muslim backgrounds. It doesn't mean white, Christian type backgrounds, whatever the personal beliefs of the person is, who do not have the financial means to support themselves through their training. And then he said he'd noticed a difference since moving north after living in London for 20 years. Yes, he would have done, because London is a far more cosmopolitan area in Britain than most other places in Britain. And he feels that most sorely. My advice to him is move back to London. Start your own radio station. I don't know. Well, I do know. You are annoyed that there aren't as many Muslims or people of various shades of brown where you are, no doubt in a very nice area, than you would find in London. And you find that creepy. You find that affects your mental health. Let's just look at this. No, first I'm going to explain something. Throughout history, and this is a historical observation, except for maybe the Crimean Tatars and there's a Tatar community in Poland, believe it or not. I think they fulfill some of the functions that used to be fulfilled in England by gypsies. They dealt with horses and cattle herding and that sort of thing. And they are perfectly reasonable people. By the way, the Tatars, they have learned to absorb themselves within the wider Christian community in Poland. No objection to them whatsoever. But apart from those isolated pockets, Islam has gone into other countries as conquerors. It's taken hold. It's one of the most, I think probably the most successful colonial force throughout the world's history. When Britain colonised, it let people keep their own religions and their own languages. When the Arab conquerors colonised, they changed the language, with the exception of Persia and all of North Africa, which contained a lot of Christians who spoke Coptic, the Berbers who spoke Berber. All those areas, they all became Arabic speakers under the pressure from the invaders and colonisers. So that's what happened in North Africa, the Middle East, all the way along, even as far as Afghanistan and Pakistan, although they do keep their own languages. It's very heavily influenced, of course, now by Arabic. And these all had, they were Buddhists, Christians, pagans. They had their own, Zoroastrians. They're all disappearing. Even they did start to disappear under Muslim pressure, and now they're hardly existing at all. And that's the pattern of Islam in its conquering phase. And that's at the back of the mind of many Muslims. It's a sort of one of those cultural background things. They might not even feel it consciously, but it's there. And I just thought you might be interested in this, because it doesn't only extend to this sort of I see white people stuff. All right, this is from a company called Memory. They're really very useful for this sort of thing. It's an Egyptian Islamic scholar, Sheikh Ayman Khamis, but he is, if you look this sort of thing up, Andalusia and Islam, you will find dozens of the same things. So it's not just some isolated nutcase. In fact, he is one of the least nutty of the imams that I know about. Right, so what he's saying here, Al-Andalus is just like Palestine, he says. We shall never forget our lands. We say to the West, we shall never forget our lands. We shall take it back from you because it is occupied land. This is Spain we're talking about, remember. Al-Andalus is the Arabic name for Spain. And if you're wondering where the word comes from, Andalus is the Arabic version of the word vandal, because it was the Visigoths, who otherwise known as the Vandals, who took over Spain in the early medieval era. Al-Andalus is occupied by the Spaniards. They don't have the right to that land. They are colonial occupiers, according to him. But he's not alone. He really isn't. You can check that out. You don't have to believe me. Just like Palestine is occupied by the Jews. And we shall take it back, Allah willing. Okay, so there you have it. This is the background attitude of the Muslim culture. Now, of course, there are many Muslims who have grown out of that, but it's there. It's there. That any land that's been taken by a Muslim is going to be Muslim forever. And if the Muslims happen to be driven out, they have to make an effort to get it back. That's actually a commandment. And this is what is at the back of this guy's mind. Whatever he says about diversity. Following the interview, Cheryl Varley, a BBC Radio 5 live producer, said the organisation, that is the BBC, is committed to tackling the lack of diversity in its newsrooms. You shouldn't be tackling any lack of diversity in your newsrooms. You should be tackling good quality journalism, which BBC is not doing so far. And this is where it leads to being told off by a man of Muslim faith or background, at any rate, that you should be ashamed of being white because there are too many of you running a radio station in a country that is at least 95% white. All right, well, yep, that's my take on it, Mr. Arthanayake. Till next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Graniopteryx design or Grambo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.graniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.